Hey there, so I am excited to do this video to compare the Joker Nomad 5-inch to the 6.5-inch. I've had the 5-inch, you've probably seen some of my other videos if you've watched the channel for a bit, where I have talked about how much I've enjoyed the 5-inch, but there were some practical limitations of, is it enough more knife than some of my smaller knives, like say an SE3 or something, to justify itself? And I was always curious, should I have gone with the bigger one? Well, I now have the bigger one to talk about, and in short, yes, it's a heck of a lot of knife for what it offers. I'll go through some of the pros and cons. I'll show you the knife in action doing some harder use cutting tasks, and then I'll talk through my impressions of it and where I think it's ideal. All right, so here are the two Jokers side by side. I'll line them up pretty much by the ends of their handle so you can get a sense of their size difference. Obviously, as you can see, I got the larger one without the fire steel on the side, and they do also have these available in a Kydex sheath that has little scout bands on it. Very cool. I actually, in retrospect, kind of wish that I had opted for that style of sheath, but maybe I can find something custom aftermarket that would accomplish the same thing. But what I love about that kind of design is you still have the belt loop here, but then it has the bands that you could carry it like this. Now, this obviously would be kind of a large knife for scout carry, but I think it's nice to have options, and probably on a knife like this that you're gonna do some adventuring with, backpacking and that kind of stuff, you could really make an argument that Kydex would make sense because of its weather resistance more than leather would. I was carrying this one on a big trail at one point and it started raining. Luckily it didn't rain too bad, but while I was wearing it I was thinking, well, this isn't great, and I ended up putting it back in my backpack. All right. So there you can see the difference in blade between the two. It's not gigantic, but something that stands out to me a little bit looking at them is the great attribute of this, where it has this really nice belly, is accentuated a little bit on the larger one to the point that it almost has more of like a recurve right here. It makes it a bit more machete-like beyond just the extra length, and that's nice. I mean, this for a 5-inch knife actually chops pretty well and batons great. And then this 6.5-inch version just basically takes everything that's good about the 5-inch and amps it up even further. This is a good chopper. For everything from just taking smaller sticks to knocking branches off, to going around the yard and pruning things, to surprisingly this can feather stick and do smaller camp tasks as well despite its size. I really think this brings a lot to the table, and as I kind of mentioned in one of my previous videos, having had this one for about a year, it's a very nice knife, but it hugs that Goldilocks like in-between point that I think, for me anyway, sometimes makes me like, I don't know, it's a little too big for small knife stuff and it's not quite big enough to be ideal for like real big knife stuff, and I think this answers that a lot better. Of if I was going to bring a smaller knife like, say, an SE3 out with me to do general camp stuff, and you're saying, you know, can I have like a couple knives that really cover the bases? I think like an SE3 and this would be an awesome pairing, because here you've got your carver and your food prep and all that kind of stuff, and then when stuff's about to get for real, then you can pull this out and it can do all of that stuff. Whereas you can see in this case, yeah, the 5-inch is bigger, but like, is it so much bigger that it totally enables you to do stuff that your smaller knife couldn't? Not necessarily. A couple small considerations that pull a little bit in favor of the 5-inch, just things that I've noticed carrying them on the belt for a few different afternoons. I think because of the shorter length, the proportions of like, as it goes into here, where it hugs versus how much knife there is down below, this carries better on the belt. It stays a little tighter to your hip, and there's less sway with this, which for hiking and stuff I think is a better situation. Whereas this, I think just because the point where the leather squeezes the knife to kind of lock it in, there's just so much more knife, it actually doesn't feel like it retains as well. As you can see, you can shake it back out, whereas that doesn't happen in the smaller one. But also, this, when it's hanging on the belt, there's just a lot more sway. It flops around more. That may or may not bother you. It's not a huge deal for me, but it was something that stood out in my just using it for several weeks to try it. That doesn't really happen on this, and so it just seemed like something I should tell you. All right, I'm gonna process some fallen branches from brush piles and stuff like that. Some of this is dead and a little bit wet wood, so it's not as strong as some wood as far as chopping, but I consider it, at least as a start, a good real world example of using this, because in my yard anyway, I deal with trees dropping these kind of limbs all the time, and this would be something I would on a regular basis be using this knife for. So here we go. It's a little bit bigger one. Wow, this one's tough. There we go. All right, at this point I figured I should switch gear to use the Eafengrow 143. The last several knife reviews where I've ever had a big knife where I've done chopping, it's ultimately gone up against this one just because of my collection anyway. This is one of the best heavy use chopper knives that I own, and so it's only right that this Joker goes up against this guy. Obviously, you can tell that the blade profile is very different. This is a heavier knife, less svelte for some of the tasks, but AUS 10 steel I've been very impressed by so far. This is my first knife that I've owned in AUS 10, and it's been a great introduction to the steel. Yeah, one thing that I noticed right away, I do seem to get more leverage with this knife. It bites in a little further per chop, but it also is a little bit harder to get the blade back out. The saber grind that this has works a little different. However, my arm is getting less tired for sure, chopping through a bigger piece like that. You definitely have more weight on the knife helping you with this one. I really appreciate that. I was curious when I first got the bigger Joker to see how much is the convex edge going to just totally make up for that, or would this still chop better because of it's just such a big cleaver of a knife. Whoop. Bam. I would say at this point that the Joker is probably the better all-around knife, only because when I've tried to use this one for food prep and smaller camp tasks, it sometimes feels like a little bit more knife than you need. I don't quite get that feeling as much with the Nomad. It is still a big knife, but it has more of a svelte design compared to this, that just it feels a little bit more light and nimble. So probably a better all-around knife. Okay, so final thoughts. I'm going to talk through it like I've done in several of my other knife talks. Where would this fit into my lineup? I actually think this feels very natural in the answer to that question, more so than other knives have been when I've gotten them, which is a real compliment to it. Obviously, there is a little bit more heft in the blade of the Eafengrow 143, and in some chopping tasks, this is still, you get a little bit more bite per swing. So there's still cases where I would use this. However, while this is incredibly tough and stands up to a heck of a lot of abuse that I've put it through once or twice, I have put a very mild nick in the blade, especially right in here in the belly. I was able to sharpen it out without too much trouble, but it was at least to show me, hey, it is mortal after all. You know, you can actually damage it. It takes a lot, but you can. I think the convex edge on this, making it kind of more like an axe, just makes it so much more impact resistant that, I mean, Bowler N6.95 steel, from my experience thus far, is a pretty decent steel anyway, but the convex edge on it and the great heat treat that Joker does, this is an incredibly tough knife. It's very versatile. And like I said earlier, I think it pairs incredibly well with a smaller knife, such as an SE or something. You could really easily go with a 2-knife setup for camping, backpacking, etc., and have all of your major bases covered. I would feel very comfortable using the SE for anything that I'd be doing around the camp, and then this just as an add-on to it. If you wanted to go with a 1-knife kind of thing, I think you could pull it off really well with this. And I really like that it comes in the 2 configurations of the leather sheath or the Kydex, and even if you go with the leather sheath, you can get it with fire steel. The Kydex version comes with fire steel. If you were to carry it with fire steel, then you have a knife that I think truly like fits the survival knife type of scenario, where you're like, if you got lost in the woods or you were camping or whatever, you have a knife that you know could do pretty much anything you needed it to do. You could take down small trees with this. You can process firewood if you had to, if you didn't have an axe, if you didn't want to use an axe, whatever your reason is. You can feather stick with this. You can carve with this. You could do food prep with this. It wouldn't be the best at it, but it does it pretty well because of that convex edge. The fact that it has the fire steel means that, like some people talk about, you could set your backpack down at where you plan to camp and wander off a small ways, and then whoops, you get turned around and you're out for a while now. When some people say, why bother having fire steel on your sheath, the answer that I often hear is because you don't always bring your backpack everywhere you go when you're out in the wilderness, but you probably have your belt knife with you everywhere you go. And if your belt knife allows you to make fire, between what the knife allows you to do and making fire, it could keep you going in a very condensed package. Can't argue with that. I think as a general large knife kind of setup, I finally found something that I use a little bit more often than my Eafengrow. It is still lighter than the Eafengrow is, so you're saving a little bit of weight. And I think just the blade geometry of this and the convex edge allows it to punch above its weight class. So for already a decent sized knife, it just really performs well on a lot of tasks. And it feather sticks better than this, as you could imagine. The high saber grind is fairly slicey, but it has a regular edge that is only so-so because of its size for feather sticking. This does a much better job of those tasks. And so I think what you get overall is a little better because it doesn't chop always quite as well as something as big and heavy as this, but it's close enough and it does other things better with less weight. I just think that's a better overall package for what you're getting. So that would be my recommendation. As my own tastes in knives evolve, I think I'm moving away from the 1-knife, you know, kind of fantasy, and like I've talked about, sort of the 2-knife setup makes a lot more sense to me. If maybe I would carry a multi-tool or a really small folding knife for general utility, have something a little bigger for general camp tasks like this, a good all-arounder, and then have this in the backpack or something for when you really need more knife. If you have questions about something I didn't cover in the video, or if you have an idea for a follow-up video on this that you would like to see, let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can make that for you guys. I love coming outside and just playing with the knives, so you know, it's no big thing for me to come out here and process some stuff that I'm doing all the time. It's always just a pick of the litter each day which knife I'm going to use. So I thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.